your Steelers hired their Matt Canada replacement. They decided to go out of house. They said, we're going to go get someone, bring some new blood into Pittsburgh, change up this offense that has been struggling. And they went and they got former Falcons head coach Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator. And I'm not going to say anything. I just want to hear your reaction to this.
Yeah, I don't like the look on your face with this because you're just like really like cheesing at the idea of the Steelers' downfall, which is fine. But the Steelers, they'll find a way to go 9-8 with this or 10-7. But my initial reaction was very unpleasant. I got really angry when I saw it pop up on my Instagram feed. Called my dad, who is a fan of the show, as well as a former guest co-host on the show as well. We talked about it. We both were very disapproving of it. I also texted Connor, who was also a guest co-star at one point on the show while Josh was absent in October. And he also had said as a joke that if the Steelers were to sign Arthur Smith and he said this to his dad, that if they were to sign Arthur Smith, he would not watch Steelers football. And he doesn't act. I don't genuinely think I don't think he actually
Connor got to go through.
I don't know if he's actually going to go forth with that, but because we've got he's got a fantasy football league to run, so he can't be doing that. But nonetheless, I'm a little disappointed, but I feel like in a way this is probably the best option out of all of the people that we have interviewed, because all the people that we have interviewed probably could arguably have been worse, possibly. I mean, you're talking about interviewing like coaches and coordinators and stuff from Carolina who had the worst offense in the league, which we had a bad offense, but we were like 30th, 31st. Carolina was like 32. It's like, why would we want to go from, what we had to even possibly worse? I mean, it could be better, but I don't think so. I don't think that was the right move. But when it comes to Arthur Smith, on the other hand, I know he was an offensive coordinator in Tennessee. I believe it was during that strong Titans run heavy offense that they had going into the AFC Championship. I believe it would have been.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. So, and I think that in a way, I feel like any coordinator could have figured that out and done something like that. I mean, it's not like rocket science to just be like, oh, King Henry is blowing up this year and he's a destructive running back. Let's just run it like most of the game and like orchestrate plays based on running backs. I mean, I don't think it's that difficult, especially when the team was built off of King Henry during that run. Now, don't get me wrong. They obviously used Ryan Tannehill and some of their offensive weapons at the time and whatnot. But I do think that Arthur Smith as a coordinator wasn't really that like significant, but obviously Atlanta thought it was, and they brought him into Atlanta, and we kind of saw what he did with his offensive weapons when he was there. And obviously he didn't, and we've talked about this on the show before, he didn't really utilize his like young guys, his future stars to their utmost potential. And a lot of times they were almost just non-existent. We had seen, I think Bijan Robinson, Drake London, a lot of these guys just getting the most random either plays or just not being given the ball when you have like Cordell Patterson. Is that right?
Yeah. Bijan blocking for Cordell Patterson. You have Kyle Pitts blocking for Jonnu Smith. Things.
It's just like, why, when Kyle Pitts is supposed to be a generational tight end, which I don't know at this point, because they've pretty much wasted his years of trying to gain that experience. Bijan, luckily, he still has time, but it's still one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you split it up a little bit, kind of do what Detroit was doing, where they were trying to figure out what they were doing with Gibbs, and they finally figured out a 2-man running back game worked, but Atlanta never figured it out. And I don't think Patterson is that type of, running back kind of scheme up in like they do up in Detroit, where it's like you have Gibbs and Montgomery. Montgomery is a very good running back, and Gibbs is a very good running back. I feel like Cordell Patterson, on the other hand, is a little older. So, I mean, it's kind of hard for him to run the same as like a David Montgomery, if you're comparing a Gibbs to a Robinson type thing. But in my opinion, I don't really think this is a good move for the Steelers. I personally don't. I mean, maybe I'm just, very angry about everything. But I mean, I'm a little, like I said, I was a little disappointed over just, the season. And then we kind of started lighting it up. We had an okay showing against Buffalo. Definitely thought it could be better. And I've talked about it on the show before. But when it comes to Arthur Smith coming in, I really hope he changes something, because if it's kind of like the lackluster performance he had as a head coach in Atlanta, we're going to be in for another one of those rough 2 to 3 years where it's just going to be up and down type offenses. Because I feel Arthur Smith did win games. I mean, he went 7-10, I think, all 3 seasons, I think, right?
In the NFC South,
yeah,
the worst division in football. But
so I mean, and the team is not bad. I mean, they put up offense. It's not like they didn't, but like I feel like they definitely could have done more. I mean, he's definitely. I'm gonna say he's definitely gonna be better than Matt Canada, but I don't think he's going to put us on a level of 100. I think he is. I think any coordinator is better than Matt Canada. I don't want Matt Canada back in there, but I mean, I think that he won't use the players correctly. So I don't think he will.
What about like what happens? I mean, we already saw it this year with Matt Canada, and I don't know the name of your interim OC, but George Pickens. He wasn't being used. He got upset multiple times when he wasn't being used. He didn't feel like his talents were being utilized, which is fair. What happens when he's asked to block for, I don't know, some random wide receiver that you guys bring in, or he's asked to do something stupid like that in Arthur Smith's offense?
Well, I think George Pickens is kind of, I think the thing with George Pickens that I've kind of realized is that he's willing to do things if he's a part of the action. The problem is like during the Matt Canada offense and stuff, he wasn't targeted. It was mostly Deontay Johnson, jet sweeps, a lot of very lackluster performances. Maybe you put that on Kenny, maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. But kind of towards the end, you kind of saw George Pickens blocking a little bit more in some of those last 3 games. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was either him or Warren, but I know that they blocked for Calvin Austin third whenever he went in for a jet sweep. And I know that George Pickens, I know for a fact, I remember watching him block for something. So I don't think it would bother him necessarily, as long as it's not a situation where it is like a Matt Canada where George Pickens isn't getting targeted. Like if Kenny Pickett is going to be, obviously he'll probably be starting at the beginning of the season next year. If you have him just constantly throwing to Deontay Johnson and George Pickens is wide open on a fadeaway, and you don't chuck it up to him, then yeah, I mean, George Pickens is going to continue to get mad, and he's probably not going to block because he's going to be like, well, I'm not being utilized. Why am I going to put in the effort that I need to? So, in which I think is a downfall of a player to keep that mentality. But in a way, sometimes you kind of don't blame him because we've seen what he can do. He's a really, really good player. You just need to bring him out of his shell. You need to throw it to him. I mean, he's not going to catch everything, but no great wide receiver is going to catch everything unless they're hot. And the problem is George Pickens this season, wasn't getting the target. So he obviously couldn't heat up like some of these wide receivers like Amon-Ra, who's getting 8 or 9 receptions a game, type thing. So, and George Pickens only got 3 or 4. I don't know, unless it becomes a consistent thing where it becomes frustrating, where it's oh yeah, Pickens, we're just going to continuously use you to block. Then yeah, I think he's probably not going to block. But I don't know how that'll change everything. I don't know how that'll change the complexion. And who knows, maybe Pickens will request a trade at that point, which might throw everything in the fire, because at that point it's all right, well, Arthur Smith just made freaking George Pickens request a trade. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but at this point you kind of just throwing something at the wall and just seeing if it sticks or not, because you don't really know what's going to happen with this dude. Because like I said, it's a different coordinating thing when you're in Tennessee and you're focusing a lot on the run game we have 2 decent running backs. We're trying to figure out our passing game, which they never really figured out down in Atlanta with them swapping around Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke and trying to figure out what to do over there. So I'm not feeling real confident about this move. I'm not going to lie to you, Josh. Not lying. I'm not real confident about this. I don't know how it's going to go. I for some reason, I thought at one point, like sometime in this decade, we could go like 11-6 or 12-5, but I think we're stuck in 9-8s and 10-7s for the next couple of years. I'm not looking too high because apparently they didn't want Byron Leftwich, which I think is strange because, I think Byron Leftwich could have been an interesting coordinator. And I also, I think that there could have been other options that they may have been able to explore, but maybe I mean, granted, I don't know who would have been even like an option. And obviously there's like really, really terrible coordinators out there that you don't want to bring in either, but I don't know. What do I know? I guess.
Well, I'm interested to see how this plays out, but
I mean, either way, I've kind of just accepted the fact that we will probably still beat the Cincinnati Bengals twice this season. I'm just kidding. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm interested to see how it plays out. Like I said, I can't really see Mike Tomlin having a losing season with this. I mean, heck, if he can have winning seasons with Matt Canada, I feel like he can have a winning season at this point with anybody. But apparently, according to my dad, who probably listens a lot to the radio, because I don't remember where he said he heard this. He talked about this on the phone today, and I'll double check it. But if it is true, it's kind of worth noting. But Art Rooney obviously said that, obviously they were talking about extensions and stuff, and he said that he's fully supports Mike Tomlin. And he wants to give him like a longer term extension or whatever. However, he's tired of losing in the playoffs. So, and if that is a true statement, which I'm sure it is, because, if you heard it on the radio, they're not going to report a lot of false news unless you're Mark Madden, who likes to stir the pot. I think that's an interesting statement. Now, I don't think they'll fire him. So, shout out to my boy Australia. I don't think they're gonna fire him.
Steelers Nation Australia, shout out.
Yep, but I do wonder what that could mean, more or less. Maybe more offensive coordinator turnovers or defensive coordinator turnovers. Maybe they try to shop other. I don't know, but it's interesting. It's interesting because I don't expect a playoff win this season. Coming up next season, I guess.
I say this as your friend. And as a football podcast host, I think the Steelers fan bandwagon is about to be in for hell. I think you're going to see a lot of quarterback turnover soon.
Yeah.
Running back situation could get weird. We could see people starting to get mad on defense. We could see some wide receiver controversy. I already know at some point someone is going to be like Charlie Day with that meme where he's like drawing the conspiracies together, and they're going to be like, Derrick Henry's a free agent. Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator during Derrick Henry's best season in Tennessee. That means Derrick Henry is a Pittsburgh Steeler, and that's going to blow up at some point.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that, because why would we need Derrick Henry when we have Najee and Warren? And I know people are like, oh, Najee's not good. Well, he still had over 1,000 yards rushing, and I think he had over 1,000 yards rushing over the last 3 or 4 seasons. So it's not like this dude's bad. He just doesn't get the runs as explosive as like an Isaiah Pacheco or even like a Jalen Warren. So what are you going to replace Najee? What are you going to do? Trade him?
I don't Someone is going to say Derrick Henry.
I know, but I'm shouting this now so that when time comes up and people start yelling about this and put it on, that you want to come back to this episode, Josh, when we're done with this, and then in March or whenever the free agency starts, make sure to clip this when rumors start coming up that Derrick Henry is going to be coming up, because it's not going to happen. There's no need for it unless we trade one of our running backs away, which I don't think is reasonable, considering Derrick Henry is probably going to want a lot of money. And I don't know if we want to spend all that money on Derrick Henry when we have other points of interest that we need to focus on, such as a center.